This video will contain spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us 2 has a lot of things going for it, and a lot of things that just frustrate me. But nothing other than the fact that this game just kept going. Nothing frustrates me more than the character of Manny. I should say that not everything that's done with Manny is bad. He's got a really great relationship with his dad, and he's a good friend to both Abby and Mel, and many of the other characters we see. I also think his character design is done well. He's modeled after Alejandro Eda, his voice actor, and I think they did a really good job of translating him into the game. And, frankly, I have no complaints because he looks a lot like my brother, man bun included. He looks realistic. I have no commentary on his design. I will say also that while I don't love how thick his accent is, considering he's been in the US for like 25 years, I understand why it is as thick as it is, and I don't have enough complaint about it to really make it a big deal. And that's the good. So with that out of the way, let's get into everything else and what really, really bothers me about Manny. I think this goes into the discussion of what Manny's role in this game really is. Because he's important to Abby's story, but his characterization is lazy at best, and I think that really does a disservice to the players of this game. He is there when Abby kills Joel, and even from that brief interaction and his small part in that, we learn so much about how the game is going to handle him. These are his first words in the game. And boy, is there a lot to unpack there. I think it's really representative of how this game goes on to treat him. He is, in many ways, a token. And they don't really build past the fact that he is Latino. And then we have this second line, which I know really pissed a lot of people off, because he also spits on Joel when he says it. But this happens. And I can forgive this line a little bit more, because it feels more realistic to what a Latino might say in a very emotionally charged situation. And I understand why people don't like him based off of this. I'm not saying you should like him, but he's still important to Abby. When we finally return to Abby after 3 very long days of playing as Ellie, who do we see first? Manny. Manny introduces us to Abby not as this cold-blooded killer, but as a person with friends and a daily routine. And this is the interaction that they have at the very beginning of day 1.
Hey, thanks for giving me the room last night.
Yeah, who was it this time? That cook chick?
Nah, the weather chick. She's down from the mountain.
Oh, the scientist. Nice.
Immediately, we are treated to one of Manny's few personality traits. He's a womanizer. And this is one of my core issues with Manny. He really embodies the Latin lover trope. Now, this trope, which originates in movies from the 1920s, but has been reinvented in the 50s and even much later, is basically of a Latin man who is spicy and seduces women. I think the prime example of this is Zorro, and with that, Antonio Banderas. And even if you squint a little bit, you could argue that Puss in Boots from Shrek is a Latin lover. All of this to say, it's not unique to make a Latino man a womanizer. It's very, very common, and it's very overdone. And beside the fact that as he's walking through the hall, talking about his latest sexual partner, he's also flirting with another woman.
Hello, Miss Potts.
We also run into his quote-unquote sex den, which includes a letter from one of his partners talking about how great of a lover Manny is, and literally calling him lover. Now, I should be fair. The game gives us a little more than just that on Manny. We know that he likes anime and movies and cars and photography. But it's really easy to miss all of that if you don't go and explore his room. If you don't look at the items that tell you that that's part of who he is, you miss it. Instead, you get the fact that he's a Latin lover, and that alone. And it's important to think about, as a game, what do you make missable, and what do you make in your face? All of this is bad, but it's not what bothers me the most about Manny. What I can't forgive this game for is their absolutely botched attempt at Spanglish. Some of it isn't that bad. I would believe that he would curse in Spanish. Lots of Latino people do. It's pretty natural. And some of it is a little forced. What I can't forgive is them not even speaking Spanish correctly. Grammatical errors are ridiculous in a game like this with so many people looking at it. The thing is that Spanglish has its own grammar. It exists in a way that makes sense. And the game just doesn't follow that. One of the important details about Spanglish is that when you are switching from one language to another in the middle of a sentence, you treat the second language and the words that you use there as if the beginning of the sentence were in that second language. I'll give you an example of where the game fails this completely. Let's look at this line.
Get me something con picante.
This line drives me insane. It sounds weird. Let's look at this entirely in English. This sentence in English, if you're trying to make it make sense, would be, get me something spicy. In Spanish, it would be, consígueme algo picante. So, if you're going to change sentences halfway through, you're still going to use the words that you would in the other language. Let me give you some examples of how this could work. You could say, get me something picante, or get me algo picante, or consígueme algo spicy. All of those could work, but you don't say get me something con picante, because con means with, and picante is an adjective. You don't say get me something with spicy. Who says that? No one would say that. It doesn't make any sense. So, my question is, how did this get cleared? How did this happen? Who didn't look over this? The voice actor, Alejandro Eda, is Mexican. Why did he not catch this? Did he say something? Was he too afraid to? What about everyone else at Naughty Dog? Why did no one realize that this makes no sense? And that's what bothers me. Because this is a game with a huge budget, and if you sat through the credits, you know a lot of people worked on it. So why did no one catch this? I wanted to look into if this is something that's related to Mexican slang. I'm not Mexican. Most of my Spanish is Salvadorian Spanish. So I thought, well, maybe this is something that people say. I found a Reddit thread about it. Not about the show, but about using picante as a noun. And the bulk of people said no one uses that ever. And then some people said occasionally people will use it for hot sauce. Even if that is the case, it still doesn't make sense in this sentence. But if I am wrong, do tell me, because I don't know Mexican Spanish. And I was even more curious to see how this scene was done in the Latin American Spanish dub. So I played through it, and this is how it's done.
Consígueme algo con picante.
Te daré lo que haya.
I should say that playing through this section in Spanish was such a unique experience. It was really different. You don't really realize how thick Manny's accent is until everyone's accent is thick and they're all speaking in Spanish. I feel like a lot of Manny's character is being Latino, and when everyone else, at least vocally, is Latino, you lose some of that. And I was really surprised by how much I felt the game changed when you were listening to the Latin American dub. And I'm interested in the fact that they keep the grammatical error. There's nothing really to show the fact that Manny is supposed to be speaking Spanish in a game that's supposed to be in English when you get to this dub. It's completely blended together. Other than the fact that there's this grammatical error, you can't tell that this is supposed to be in a different language. And I think that really changes the experience of Manny as a character. Even more so is the fact that in the Spaniard Spanish version, that's not how they handle it. They still keep the bad grammar from what I can tell, but the voice actor changes the way he speaks. So most of Manny's lines are going to be said with your typical Spanish accent, and then when he's supposed to be speaking in Spanish, it goes to a Latin American Spanish accent. And those are two very different accents, and it's very noticeable. Now, I should say, I haven't been able to access the Spaniard dub. What I have been able to access, though, is people talking about how annoying the Spaniard dub is, specifically for that reason. If you have played it, I would love to see this. To be fair, all of this is something that non-Spanish speaking audiences just wouldn't notice. But it immediately took me out of this world, and made me realize that the people who wrote Manny definitely were not Latino. And it just made Manny feel fake. I know, this is a video game, all the characters are fake, but especially from the jump, none of the other characters feel quite as fake as he does. And I feel like it stands in contrast to what Neil Druckmann, the co-director and writer of the game, said about his goals with representation. This is from an interview that he did specifically talking about Dina's Jewish identity, but I think it applies to this idea of representation regarding Manny. He says, "I know the joy I get from seeing people that mirror me in some ways in games, which is why one of the reasons we have an initiative within Naughty Dog to create a diverse cast that better reflects our players and the world that we live in." I quoted that from the article. The grammar issue is there too. And while I certainly feel like Manny's physical appearance mirrors my, community experience, I think he looks Latino. Anything that could really grow from that is absolutely stunted by the fact that his Spanish is shit. And that's not a dig on Alejandro Eda, he speaks Spanish well, it's just the grammar and the use of it just feels so bad. And there are only a handful of lines in this game that are in Spanish. And almost every single time, it's standing out for the wrong reason. If Manny and Abby are fighting for their lives, it's not the time for him to go, and it's not the time for him to say, muévate. While most people who have grown up vaguely around people who speak Spanish might understand something like muévate, there are lots of people who would not, and if you're fighting for your life, is now the time to take that risk? Most of the Spanish in this game is directed towards Abby. And yes, she is the person that we are playing as, but we've seen nothing to suggest that she can speak Spanish, or she's learning Spanish, or that Manny has taught her some Spanish. There are some Spanish words that bilingual people might throw in when they're around non-Spanish speakers, and there are some they're only going to use when they're around other bilingual Spanish speakers. I commonly will say something like "como se dice" when I'm trying to think about what I'm trying to say. And do I need the other person in that experience to know Spanish and understand what I'm saying? No, because that's something I'm really saying to myself. It's a filler word as I'm trying to think things through. It's the same as saying essentially. I might curse in Spanish, but do I need the other person around me to understand that curse? No, that's not what cursing is for. On the other hand, a direction like muévate, especially in a life or death situation, you want them to understand. And if you're telling me that Abby has been learning Spanish, give me something to suggest that. We could get a Spanish dictionary on her desk, or a book about, Spanish grammar. But we've got nothing, and yet Manny is often speaking in Spanish to her. And I just think it doesn't make any sense. Editing Talia here, I missed something. Abby says pendejo one time. And I'm pretty sure that's the only time she says anything in Spanish. And I don't know if we even want to really count it, because it's literally just her saying pendejo, but here it is.
Pendejo.
And this is all such a shame, because one, Alejandro Eda is Mexican, he speaks Spanish incredibly well, and the game itself has some really well done lines in Spanish. If you stand close enough to Manny and his dad in the cafeteria, you see this interaction.
¿Qué, papá? Ya regresé. ¿Cómo has estado?
Esta pinche cuchara.
Ya, en unos minutos.
A Isaac no le molesta que te mires de esta manera.
Papá, tranquilo. No te preocupes. Come, por favor.
¿Con quién vas a salir?
Con Abby.
Ah, bueno. Hoy están diciendo que van a asar un puerco para la cena y unos sándwiches.
And it makes me wonder if the actors were asked to improvise these lines, or if an entirely different writing team wrote these lines for them, because it's just casual chit-chat, but it's really well done. Why couldn't we have had that for the actual dialogue? Why is that left for something that most people will miss? I'd also briefly like to mention the fact that only 3 people in this game actually speak Spanish. One is obviously Manny, then it's Manny's dad, and then it's the cook at the cafeteria.
Abby, what are you doing? Hey, tenemos prisa. Dame 3 burritos.
Hey man, there's a lot.
To be fair, she doesn't actually speak Spanish. She just listens to a sentence that anyone who didn't speak Spanish would not understand. Instead, what we get is that other than Manny and his direct family, the only other person who speaks Spanish in this game is a cook. An unnamed cook who we never see again. And in thinking about the use of Spanish, I was really intrigued to see if there were any Spanish signs in the game, specifically in Santa Barbara, because there is such an important Mexican influence in California. I could tell you that, I'm Californian. And so I played through that section of the game, as much as I hate it so much, so dearly much. It was so painful to replay. But I really wanted to see if there was anything in the architecture, the signage, that was in Spanish. And the only thing I could find was a random post that is already included, I think, in other parts of the game, that is just like a legal document that you have, and I don't know what this is. All I know is that it's saying the fraud is bad, and it also says it in Spanish. The only other thing that's in Spanish in Santa Barbara, at least from what I could spot, is this mosaic that's in the actual resort. I just think it's weird. Like, it's not bad. What draws me to it is the fact that a resort like this is really not meant for Latinos. It is a resort for white people who want to experience this kind of idealized version of California. Having the only thing that is in Spanish be part of this resort really bugs me. I think we could have had signs at the train station that were in both English and Spanish. That's very, very common. We could have had a Spanish menu at the restaurant. We could even have had a Spanish magazine or something like that around. And instead, we get this sort of exoticized Spanish for white people. Now, thinking about Manny and his role in this actual story, he really is important. For Abby, he mirrors Jesse's death, and I was noticing online that a lot of people really enjoy rewatching his death. You search Manny, The Last of Us 2 on YouTube, and it's just videos of people watching him die over and over again. I'm not here to police your behavior. If you like that, go for it. But I think it shows how bad of a job this game did at making us really feel connected to Manny. Because with Jesse's death, at least for myself, I was absolutely devastated. And if he's supposed to mirror Jesse's death for Abby, we should have at least some sort of pain or sadness around it. We should care for his character even a little bit, even if we recognize that what he did to Joel is not something that we like. We should still at least be like, man, that's sad. Instead, lots of people were like, I'm enjoying watching him die over and over again. Again, I think that's just representative of how bad of a job they did. And that's really what bothers me about the game. But now the issue is, we've got the show coming out, and how are they going to handle him there? I think the show has multiple hurdles ahead of it. One, I think the feedback from the audience is clear that they just did not feel connected to Manny at all. Two, we now have two very important characters in this game who are Latino. Firstly, we have Pedro Pascal as Joel. I recognize that many people don't believe that Pedro Pascal's Joel is Latino. Personally, I disagree. One, he's from Texas, and there's plenty of Latinos in Texas, and there's plenty of light, almost white Latinos in Texas. And I personally think, looking at his arc in the first game / first season, it adds something to it if you're considering him to be Mexican or some other type of Latino, because then you add in the idea of machismo and trying to get out of his shell and become more open and sensitive as really a way of overcoming this machismo. I think that really builds onto his character and adds another layer. And I can recognize that some people just don't agree with me there, and that's fine. I think the creators of the show have decided that in this world Joel is Latino, because otherwise, why would they cast Gabriel Luna as Tommy? If you wanted to make the statement that in this world Pedro Pascal as Joel is white, it would have been so easy to just cast a white man. And they didn't. So I think we can assume that they've decided that Joel and Tommy are Latino. And if they are, how does that change Manny's role? There has to be some consideration of this. And I think it could even be a way to connect Manny, for all his harm against them, to Joel and Tommy. I should also say that I think some of this work of making us care about Manny is going to come through a flashback episode in season 3. I think we're going to see Manny and his dad leaving Mexico at the beginning of the outbreak, and how they get to the Salt Lake City crew and all of that. I think that is going to be a flashback episode that we get, and I think that will do some of the heavy lifting for making people really care about Manny. Regardless, the show is going to have a really hard time copying Manny from the game directly, and I frankly don't know why they would do that. I just think he does not work well in the game. I also think that because there are at least 2 very important actors in the show who are Latino, hopefully 3 by the time that Manny is cast, it's going to be really hard for them to get away with some of this, bad Spanish, bad representation, because hopefully someone would speak up about it, right? And I really, really hope that they do better in the show. Not because I love Manny, I don't really like any of the characters in the show, but because I think we have a chance at seeing a really interesting character here, and having interesting dynamics, and improving the way that he is used in the game. Manny can be more than the box labeled Mexican that they've shoved him inside. He can be someone who really matters to Abby. Not just a body who's there leading us through, but really a close friend. Someone who we care about and don't want to replay his death over and over again. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you guys find it interesting. If you are Mexican, please comment below if you've ever heard anyone use picante as a noun, because I can't. What is with that? Who allowed this? So please let me know, and I'd love to hear what you guys think.